Inga mana, inga reo, e nā hoe whā, e rau rangatira mā, tēnā koutou, tēnā tātou katoa. No mai, haere mai, piki mai ki Tamaki Makaurau. And welcome to the RMLA to come back to Auckland, I think after 11 years for your conference this year. Can I just make some acknowledgements, first of all, to Te Aroha Morahu. He's just left, but in his absence, what a fantastic opening and what an inspirational speech, which is, I think, says something about the future and the future place of tangata whenua in Tamaki Makaurau and in New Zealand. I think that speech can give us a lot of confidence. Can I acknowledge Environment Court Judge Jeff Smith? Can I acknowledge Justice Tony Randerson? I'm not sure whether Tony's here yet. Yes, I think, maybe, but it is presence or absence to acknowledge the critical role that he played in chairing the review group that led to the Resource Management Act. Can I acknowledge local board members here? I see some members of the Waitemata local board. If I can acknowledge Pippa Coombe and Richard Northey, there may be others. And last but certainly not least, Marie Baker-Galloway, President of the RMLA. Thank you for choosing to have your conference this year in our city of Auckland. You've asked me to speak, and I'll read what you've asked me to speak on, just so you know that I'm on track. My vision for Auckland's development in the face of rapid densification, growing traffic congestion, strain on infrastructure, and super diversity. I'm not sure whether they're meant to be positives or negatives, but we'll talk about them. And the key challenge, and it was the cryptic question, if not livability, then what? And I see the title of the conference is Livability, and of course I'm not using that as a slogan for Auckland. So I should start by explaining that. It's not that livable is not desirable, of course it is, but I wanted something that was a little more ambitious than that and a little more specific. So what I talk about, I guess my ambition for Auckland, is for it to be a world-class city where talent wants to live. A city that is innovative and smart. A city that is inclusive, both of its diversity and ethnicity, but also of all of its people, so no one is left behind. And certainly not last, or least I should say, a city that sustains a beautiful and clean environment. The challenges that you set out in your questions to me are very real ones. We're currently, as a city, growing by 50,000 additional residents a year. Just focus on that figure for a moment. That is, we are adding a population the size of Tauranga City each and every year. And has that put pressure on our physical and our social infrastructure? The answer, of course, is yes. We have created a unitary city of Auckland, and that is really important from the viewpoint of governing the city and maintaining a uniformity of standards across its breadth. We've put in place our unitary plan, and I pay tribute to the last council for achieving that. It wasn't easy in the face of people who wanted to resist the change that inevitably comes when you build a city that will reach 2 million people within a decade or slightly longer. So those changes were positive changes, but there was a major omission in what the government of the day did when they created the so-called super city. That omission was to create a revenue base that will enable us to build the infrastructure to meet the needs of that population growth without diminishing the quality of our life and without damaging the ease of doing business in our city. And it's important to have a vision, and I'm going to talk about the vision for Auckland, but a vision remains a mirage unless you have the mechanism for converting what you want to achieve into reality, and to do that you need to fund it, and in particular, you need the infrastructure. The problem of infrastructure and of funding is something that has to be addressed urgently for this city. And on Saturday, we will know, maybe we won't know, but within a couple of weeks we will know who is going to be the government of New Zealand for the next 3 years. And the urgent priority I have to address to them is how we can fund our city and how we can create the infrastructure so that our city can contribute everything that it is capable of to New Zealand rather than being a problem for New Zealand. Without that infrastructure, we face a city that risks gridlock. We add 799 cars every week to our roads in Auckland. And we haven't provided the infrastructure not to cope with the cars, but actually to find alternatives to the cars. We have a huge excess of demand over supply of housing, and that has caused a housing shortage, and that in turn has caused unaffordability, and we need to address that. We need to address the pressures that population growth put on our environment. Not all of those pressures come just from recent growth. For 100 years, this city has had a combined stormwater and wastewater system that means every time it rains, just in the Western Isthmus area to the west of us here, there are more than 70 outflows from our wastewater that flood into our streams and our beaches between 26 and 52 times a year. Now, every one of those problems is a fixable problem, and we have to fix them in order for Auckland to make the contribution to this country it is capable of. This city is now 36% of New Zealand's entire population. It is 38% of its GDP. But the most important figure is this: it is gaining 50% plus of the country's growth. In order for New Zealand to succeed, this city has to succeed. This is an international city. This is the city that New Zealand has that makes it capable of being globally competitive. One of the people that I admire is the late Sir Paul Callaghan. And Callaghan's favourite saying was that for New Zealand to succeed, it needed to be a place where talent wanted to live. Te Arawa talked about tourism and he talked about dairy, but actually we need to be much more than that for this country to keep on being in the top group of countries internationally. And that is, we do need to be an innovative city, a clever city that attracts talent to this country, but just as importantly, retains the talent that we have here. If we cannot be that, if we cannot be the city that offers choice and opportunity in work, in education and in leisure, we will continue to lose those people. We will lose them to Sydney, we will lose them to Melbourne, we will lose them to 400 comparable cities that can provide those things for their people. And we want to keep the best and the brightest of our people, and we want to attract the best migrants, and we want to attract the quality investment. So how do we go about doing that for New Zealand? Well, I believe that we start with a lot of advantages. We do have a beautiful environment, and I know that you're doing field trips, or there's some other euphemism for that, including vineyards in Waiheke and other such important venues, and you will see a city with 1,000 beaches, a city with a beautiful Gulf and islands. You'll see our monga, you'll see our parks and reserves. You will also, if you come from other parts of the country, notice the incredible diversity of our city. 40% of Aucklanders were born overseas. I don't think there are many cities in the world that match that. And what do we offer through that diversity? We offer a unique Maori culture, which is our point of difference to the world. We are the world's largest Polynesian city. We have large, vibrant populations in the Chinese and the Indian communities that bring their hard work, their entrepreneurship, and their rich and ancient cultures for us to enjoy. With all of that diversity, we are largely a tolerant, harmonious, and respectful community. And here in New Zealand, we offer people from around the world a stable, safe, and peaceful place to live. We have world-class educational institutions. We are largely free of corruption, and we have a city capable of strong governance and strong management. So our task is to build on those strengths and to meet the challenges that rapid population growth pose for us. And that entails, for many Aucklanders, a change in the traditional culture. Wallace said just before, in the 1950s, we made a far-sighted decision that we would build suburbs and we would build motorways and we would rely on the car for the future. That world has changed and we need to change with it. As we reach towards 2 million people, we need intensification of housing focused around our city centre and our city hubs and our major arterial routes. Around 70% of the future housing development in our city will be brownfields, not greenfields development. But with intensification comes certain prerequisites. Those prerequisites are good urban design. They are high quality public open spaces and they are good infrastructure. Here at the Events Centre, we're adjacent to the Wynyard Quarter. Take some time to wander around that. Look at the Viaduct Basin. If you get a chance, go out to Hobsonville Point and you will see the potential of what we as a city can do with intensification. Nobody ever goes to the centre of Paris and say, this place is one of the most intensive cities in the world, it must be terrible to live here. We can create good intensification and we can create choice and opportunity. From almost no residents a couple of decades ago, our CBD now has a resident population of 45,000 people, and within a decade that will be 75,000. We need to lift the pace and the scale of housing construction and regeneration if we are to tackle the problems of shortage of housing and affordability. We have the unwanted title of being the fourth least affordable city in the world. That needs to change, but it will take time. The Mayoral Housing Task Force brought together local government, central government, the private sector, and we came out with recommendations for the council, for the private sector, and for central government as to how we can tackle and succeed in tackling that particular challenge. And yes, it's about more houses, but it's about much more than simply physical structures. It's about visionary placemaking to create stronger communities and making this a great place for people to live. And we need a new approach too on transport, which challenges the predominance of cars in our city. That also requires culture change. That will be difficult, but it is happening. 2 weeks ago, we celebrated Auckland Rail carrying 20 million or having 20 million passenger journeys in the last year. That's up from 3.4 million just a decade ago. And when we finish the City Rail Link, which started about 5 years too late and will finish 5 years too late for what the city needs, we will be able to double the capacity of our heavy rail. We need light rail across the CBD and from the CBD and across the isthmus. And guess what? It will follow one of the old tram routes. And we need that light rail out to the airport and around to cover the east of Auckland. We need it on the next harbour crossing across to the shore, because there's no good bringing more cars into the city. There's no place for them to go, and we need it out to the west. We also need more walkways and cycleways, and we are opening them every month. Most of us as kids walked or cycled to school. So there's a bit of back to the future here. Currently, 3% of our secondary students walk or cycle to school. That's crazy. we have to have a system of safe routes so people can choose the healthy option of walking and cycling and get safely to school. And guess what? That reduces carbon emissions and it reduces the congestion, the 10% of extra traffic peak hour mornings that people taking their kids to school by car actually produce. Pedestrian traffic in our city is growing. The number of pedestrians down Queen Street has doubled in the last 6 years. So what do I see for Queen Street? I see it as something like Swanston Street in Melbourne, where you have light rail as mass transit and you have a pedestrian mall. I see down Victoria Street, running from Albert Park down to Victoria Park, a linear park that makes our city a greener, a more attractive, a safer and a more pleasant way of walking about it, and that is in our plans as well. On the health of our beaches and our waterways that Te Arawa mentioned, we have to turn around the situation of dumping wastewater into our harbours. It's a huge job. It will cost several $billion, but next year, actually this year, we are starting the design and the business case for huge new central interceptors, for more storage tanks, for green infrastructure so that we can restore the health of our beaches. Now, all of those things are important, all of those things are part of our vision for a great city, but we have to pay for them. And how are we going to do that? Well, we have taken to government already the concept of a special purpose vehicle, which is a Crown infrastructure partnership to fund those infrastructure projects in a way that does not add debt to our council's books, because we are already at our debt to revenue ratio and we cannot exceed that without losing our credit rating. We have to have funding streams to pay for that, and we will hypothecate the funds to the task that is being undertaken. So there will need to be higher water rates to pay for cleaner water. We will need, if we're to meet the $27 billion cost of infrastructure, transport infrastructure for the next decade, we will need road pricing. I said that during the campaign. And whichever government is in power, they will need to adopt something like a road pricing system. In the short term, that's probably a regional fuel tax. We need that to pay. We need revenue sharing. If you look at Australian cities, how do they pay for their infrastructure? They have revenue sharing from federal to state government that builds that infrastructure. So guess what? I've got a great idea for government. We pay 15% GST on every rate dollar that we pay in our city. Wouldn't it be a good idea if the government gave that back to us? It'd be a great idea from my point of view. It raises $239 million. But we need those revenue bases to achieve and realise the dream for our city. I want to finish by just mentioning 2021. 2021 is an important year for Auckland. In March, we will have the first defence of the America's Cup, and that will bring, directly involved with the race itself, 25,000 people to the city, and they will be here for a prolonged period, many of them. The eyes of the world will be on us, and we can showcase the beauty of our harbour, we can showcase world-leading technology. And in November and leading up to November, we will have APEC, when we have the presidents of China, of the United States, hopefully a new one. I heard him described by a Korean translator, South Korean translator this morning, as President Chump. I thought that was quite interesting. We will have the Prime Minister of Japan. We will have the leaders of the world. This is a chance for us to showcase Auckland and New Zealand as smart, as innovative, as protecting our environment, as being a great place to live and a great place to invest. So that gives us a target to work for, but it's only one of our target dates. There is much work to do for the future. Thank you for the invitation to be with you this morning. Please enjoy the conference and please enjoy your stay in Tamaki Makaurau, Auckland. I hope it's a fruitful and enjoyable visit for those of you from out of town. Thank you very much. Nō reira, tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou katoa.